stories.
Client stories. Okay.
This is the first time ever seen on the channel. Just letting you know. This will be the original.
Okay.
So
Are we recording?
we are recording. We've been recording.
Ready. Hey, it's Tom Stevens, Unplugged, here with the very first episode of Client Stories. You get to hear actual things that have happened to me in the past 28 years. Let's get started. So there's this time way back in the day, probably over 20 years ago, I was seeing this couple in my office and going through a session, right? Talking about their marriage, talking about life. And all of a sudden I start hearing like it was either some knocking at the door or it was somebody out at the front, because we have a waiting room that has a door that separates all the offices in the back from it for, just safety and privacy and all that stuff. So I kept hearing this noise and this knocking and this rattling, and I thought, well, maybe it's the cleaning people. They come in at night. This was about 6:37 at night, and they pick up the trash and clean the place. And so sometimes they'll come in while I'm still working, go in the hallway and do things. And then I just kept hearing it. And so I told the couple finally, I said, you know what, after about 10 minutes of this, hang on one second, because I think somebody's out in the waiting room and they must need something or something like that. So I go to the waiting room door. I look through the peephole, because we have a peephole seat in the waiting room. And there is a guy like right up against the door. And I couldn't see who it was because he was literally just barely could see his body. And I realized very quickly he was trying to break into my office. He had some type of knife or something, and he was chopping away the wood and in the door to try to break in. I didn't know what to do. I had a client in my office that I was trying to see. I was trying to keep my cool. And all of a sudden, the only thing I knew to do was to yell out, "What are you doing?" I'm looking through the people. He immediately runs out the front door, takes off down the hallway. This is an office building, so there's a bunch of offices in. So he takes out off our front door, and I'm like in a panic. And so guess what the very thing is that I decide to do in the middle of a session? Chase the guy. So I literally open the waiting room door and start running after this guy who could have a gun, obviously a knife, or what else to come at me. But I wasn't having it. I run out the hallway, down out into the atrium of the office building, and to the front door of the office building. And he had just gone out the door. I saw his body go out the door and take off into the dark, because it was dark at this point. And I thought to myself, why did I just chase a guy who's trying to break into my office? I go back into the office. I close the waiting room door. I saw this big gash out of my waiting room door. And I go sit back down with the couple, and I said, okay, where were we? Let's get back to what we were doing. And on top of that, I think what we figured out was he saw we were therapists. He thought we were like psychiatrists or something, that we prescribed medication. He was probably breaking in to try to get medication, which we didn't have. And I finished the session with the couple. No big deal.
Did you ever hear anything else about the guy, or did you just get away?
I called the police, which I thought was a smart thing to do. The cops came out, interviewed me, took a report. It's probably a homeless person or somebody who was just, living on the streets or something. They said this happens all the time. Not like all the time, but it's not unusual. And he said, the best thing you can do is to get a gun. That's what the policeman said, so you can protect yourself. And he said, next thing, don't chase after the guy when he takes off like that. So obviously he was scared and he was just wanting something quick.
So what happened to your door?
That's the funny thing. I don't think we ever got a new door. It was a big old gash right where you try to whittle your way through the door. I'm not sure we ever got a new door in that office building. We're not there anymore, but that was, 20 years ago. So yeah.
What did your clients say once you sat back down?
Oh, I didn't just say, where were we? I said, some guy just tried to break into my office. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, but he ran out the building, so I guess he's gone. And then I said, so where were we? How can we finish things up? It was almost towards the end of the session. I do remember that. It was about done. They weren't fazed at all. They were just chilling out and talking, and guess weren't bothered. So that's going to do it for the first ever episode of Client Stories. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe, go over to Reaction Therapy, subscribe there as well. We've got lots of links to lots of fun entertainment, and I can't wait to see you next time. That's just how I know how to end it.